Welcome to Iron Sharpens Iron, the interview show where we further craft our mindsets, outlooks, and philosophies while going toe-to-toe with a guest. As always, I'm the Mettleist, and today I am joined by my good friend Nick Stevens. He's a graduate communication student at Marquette, specializing in digital communication strategies. He was a finalist for TCU's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Award. He's an incoming communications intern for Marquette's Office of Institutional Diversity and Inclusion, and he has done some activism work for a number of different organizations. However, my favorite thing that he's done is a social justice talk featuring J. Cole lyrics. I'll leave the link to that and his profiles down below in the description, so be sure to check him out. Nick, welcome to the show.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, no problem, man. Third time's the charm on that intro. But here we are. We're here. We made it.
Yes, sir.
So there were a number of reasons why I wanted to have you on. First off, we've been friends for a very, very long time, dating back to third grade. We've always stayed in touch, even after you moved across the country, essentially. And, so we've always been banging out, and we've been following each other on social media for a while. And for as long as we've been following each other on social media, and this especially probably happened, going into college, you've always been about the shits when it's come to diversity, inclusion, and social injustice. And this just obviously with the state of affairs and everything that's going on, not only in the country, but it's also spread around the world. It made perfect sense to bring you on, and obviously I have a lot of respect for you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. First of all, I'm glad you said with the shits because I was wondering what the language, what
Yeah,
the rule
well,
was on cussing on the show, and I forgot to ask. So
yeah,
I'm glad
no,
you got that out the way.
I don't care. I truly don't care. You know me. You know how I roll with things. So there's no limits here. You can say whatever the hell you want.
I bet. Let's fucking go then.
All right.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on, and yeah, I mean, I've done like it is activism and that kind of social justice work is kind of my thing, right? And I do want to precede this conversation by saying, look, we need to acknowledge our privileges here, right? We're two white dudes that are going to be
Yes.
talking about issues involving
Correct.
race and involving the Black community. So acknowledging that, I think, before we start is super important, and that we probably will both say things that are, influenced by those privileges. So just keeping that in mind for listeners, viewers, whatever, moving forward. But yeah, I'm super excited to have this conversation. I think with everything that's going on, or not that's going on because it's always been going on, but that is amplified in the world right now in terms of police brutality and how we can best support the Black community is talk that I'm super excited to have.
Yeah, for sure. And it's very funny that you brought that up. Like we are, two white dudes. Like before we started, I tried to think of if what I needed to disclose before this, and I think I'm just ultimately going to because you set that up so well for me. Nick, you are not the first person that I asked for this. I did ask someone, a member of the Black community, to come on, and they politely and respectfully declined. I totally get it. And I also said in my message to him, I said, hey, I don't want to like just be that guy and say, hey, I know, I'm going to ask my Black friend to come on and talk about this, i.e. the Bomani Jones experience. So it really is a fascinating dynamic because, we both, so you went to college at TCU, and I went to school at Akron, and I don't know the dynamic to teach TCU. I know some of it though. But Akron's like predominantly Black, at least I wouldn't say predominantly, but it's an increasingly Black school. And because of that, so we've been around different cultures and things of that nature. And so it is always interesting when we get into conversations like this where it's like, oh, I know, I'm just going to go talk to so-and-so. And that feels really, it just feels icky. Like even like when I reached out to him, I was saying like, I don't want to do this because I know how this comes off.
Yeah, so that's one of the trends that I've seen happening a lot in recent weeks that has honestly really pissed me off, which is not that exactly, obviously. But there's a lot of white people who believe that showing their support for the Black community means texting all their Black friends and asking them how they're doing and asking them to explain how everything makes them feel.
Yeah.
And it's like that's not really like there's a different to me. There's a difference between showing support for a community and showing support in a way that's just intended to make yourself feel better and be like, I did something.
Yeah.
And the way I always see it is like, cool, it's great that you're texting your Black friends and saying what's up, but what work are you actually doing in your community and in the world to actually push for issues and causes that will improve their lives and that will deal with racism and will deal with police brutality? I mean, it's cliche, but actions do speak louder than words, especially in regards to an issue like this. And I think there's a lot of people who think that words are enough, and I think they're starting to be called out for that, which is good.
Hmm.
But but yeah, I think it's certainly just going to take time.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, this is an issue that's been going on for hundreds of years. And I said this in my video. I don't know if you watched or you read the piece and then you texted me about it afterwards. This time just felt different. And why do you think that is? Because I have my reasons, but for whatever reason, we've had case after case after case of this, and especially in the social media era, it pretty much started off with Michael Brown in 2014, 2015, and here we are now, and now this thing just has a level of momentum that I've never seen.
Yeah, so the first case of police brutality that I actually remember in terms of blowing up on social media was probably Trayvon Martin, which I
Oh, that
believe
was
was
2013. That was
yeah.
yeah, my bad,
Um,
my bad.
no, you're good. Yeah, I think, but that was you're right. I mean, that was the first one that I remember really blowing up on social media. So for this one, I think it's interesting. I'm not entirely sure, but I have a couple of guesses as to why the incident of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, garnered so much attention and has produced so much, all of these protests and everything. Um, First off, I think part of it is due to coronavirus and to people being at home a lot and on their phones more and on social
Hmm.
media more. I don't have statistics on this to back me up, but I'm guessing if I looked into social media usage in the last couple months, I'm guessing it spiked
Yeah, for sure.
because people have more time on their hands. So I think that's part of it. Um, and then I think another big part of, well, there's two other things. There's that. Um, I think that the murder of George Floyd was very graphic in a way that not all police brutality crimes are. I mean, they're all graphic, but like this one could be distilled down to a single image in ways that sometimes you can't with other ones. It was caught
Hmm.
on camera, and you have the image of Chauvin, killing killing George Floyd with his knee. So I think it was very visual in a way that isn't always the case, and people had that visual in their minds. And the third one, and I think the biggest one, is just the buildup over the last month or so with how, look, these cases have always been frequent and consistent, but it's the last few months you've had Breonna Taylor, you had Ahmaud Arbery, and then you had George Floyd. And
Right.
I think seeing those three lumped together a lot because they are all so recent and they all hit home and they were all, I mean, Breonna Taylor was in her home doing nothing and was shot by Louisville police. Ahmaud Arbery was running and then a couple dudes killed it. Like they were all very graphic and like I think most of these cases of police brutality are pretty open and closed in terms of the police, or in Ahmaud Arbery's case, racist white people doing something wrong. But these ones were like not even less debatable, if that makes sense, right?
Yes,
Like
correct.
clearly there was blatantly wrongdoing that
Yes.
couldn't even like the most racist white people are struggling to argue for it.
Yeah,
Uh,
that last point, that's where I came in. I said this one feels different because it was so obvious. This was so
right.
clear, so cut and dry, and as you just said, it's like people are struggling. People who would normally like try and defend the actions of the police officer are struggling to even try something to cling on to.
Right, right, and they're trying their asses off. But yeah, I think so. I think the combination of it being very graphic and very obvious and like indefensible that there was any that the police officer was in any way right, paired with the buildup of these three high-profile cases of police brutality and or racism. Um, I think that combination, along with COVID, really kind of is what brought this all to the forefront.
Yeah,
That's my guess.
yeah, no, I mean, and it makes sense because I don't know if I talked about this, but just going back to that Corona point, we we've been just inside for 2 or 3 months now at this point, and with nothing to do but scroll social media. And so as soon as something like this catches fire, especially in a landscape like modern day social media, I mean that shit's gonna go everywhere. And as you said, this was distilled down into one image. Uh, just me personally, and the way I kind of rock with things, I'm not interested in watching a video where someone's being killed. But I saw the screenshots, and the screenshots were enough to move me. Where it's just like obviously I can read tweets and I can see screenshots and I piece things together. But even just seeing how it was described through the screenshots, through just people talking about it, it was clear. Oh shit, this thing is about to get ugly.
Yeah, and it's tough too. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned videos and whether you want to watch it or not, because that's something that's been on my mind a lot recently in terms of how do we publicize these incidents of police brutality. And I was actually talking with a good friend of mine, Chris, the other day because he was putting out a graphic that showed the image of George Floyd being killed, and I think it's tough because there's on one side, like it needs to be shown for white people who either don't know or ignore
Hmm.
issues of police brutality, and to some extent other people of color as well, because there are some other people of color that have minimized and not supported the Black community. But primarily for white people to see, like, hey, this is happening. You need to watch this so you can really get the gravity of the situation. Like, Black people are being systemically killed in this country. But on the other hand, by posting, like, there's a lot of Black people, including some of my close friends, who, to see those videos on social media, like, that's really traumatic for them, because they see it and
Right.
it's like, this is happening to my people. Like, that could be my dad, that could be my family member. So
Hmm.
I think it's a balance between um, posting it to raise awareness versus posting it at the risk of increasing trauma for Black people. So that's something that I've thought about and actually struggled with a lot recently. But I don't know, your point about seeing the video, that just brought that to mind for me.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's so I guess the reason why, so I feel like I need to clarify why I don't want to watch the video, and that's just because death. And I've talked about this before on this channel. Death is my biggest fear. Like, just because it's fucking finite. Like, boom, it's done,
Yeah.
and like you're gone forever. And so, just like someone who's trying to just climb these mountains of life, death scares the fuck out of me. And so for me, like, that's just that. So that's why I personally just won't watch that video, because seeing someone lose their life like that, that's just for a number of reasons, that's just awful. We don't think, obviously we're getting into those now, but I don't need to elaborate on why this is so bad.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I agree.
um, we can take this in so many different directions. I think this is a very important question to ask you though. How or what sparked your interest in activism? Because as you mentioned at the top, we're two white dudes. We have a level of privilege to us, and I, I've known you for a long time. I don't think I ever saw this coming from you. And that's not to say that you weren't going to do it before, or like that's not a knock or criticism on you whatsoever. But you always like the quiet kid. Growing up, you were the pretty quiet kid, just kind of like mellowed out, chilled, laid back. And now here you are at the forefront of this. I read off obviously all the shit I read off all the shit that you're doing at the top. So just kind of talk about how you got here.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, part of it is I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my parents, who have done a very good job in terms of raising my sister and I, to care for other people. Not that I'm like, this isn't like, oh, my parents and family is amazing, like everybody else's sucks, but they did a good job of instilling that in us. But um, I think, like, I was always interested in issues of social justice, and have always leaned liberal, and have always, I think to some extent tried to care and value marginalized communities. But I think it really hit in college, actually. And I think to some extent, like, the social thing you mentioned in terms of me being quiet, I think a lot of that came out in college. I really kind of found my voice. It's funny because the Myers-Briggs, like, personality test thing,
Yeah.
where yeah, so I was introverted all through high school, and then I took it like a month after going to college, and all of a sudden, like, I've been extroverted every time I've taken it since
Really?
then. Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. But in terms of activism, it was actually, I know the exact moment that I really started to get into it, and that was fall of my sophomore year. So that would have been what,
Yeah,
2016 at
16.
TCU. There was a hashtag that went around called, it was hashtag being minority at TCU, and it was trended
I
regionally
I
and
remember this.
worth even, yeah. And basically, it was people of color at TCU speaking to their experiences dealing with and confronting racism and microaggressions and police brutality on campus. And that really hit me. And there were a lot of, well, they released a list of demands. There were a few students of color that did that and got ridiculous backlash. Like, because TCU, you mentioned school demographics earlier. TCU is an overwhelmingly white school. Like,
Right.
it's the whitest place I've ever been in my life. And
TCU, Texas Christian University. I feel like not to stereotype, but that, I mean, like, it's there, right?
yeah, yeah, it's a lot of rich, and it's super, like, frat culture. Like, it's like half the people, over half the school is like involved in Greek life,
Hmm.
and that plays a big role as well. But yeah, it's a super white school, and so they got a bunch of backlash for it. And I remember thinking at the time, like, these people just aren't listening to people of color. Like, this is a super toxic environment. This incredibly racist school and institution and culture here. And so I wrote a piece, like, coming out in support of people of color on campus. I think it was called, oh, I think it was like why hashtag being minority TCU perspectives and stories should inspire change or something like that.
Hmm.
But I just wrote that and it blew up a little bit on social media and it was actually published by like the campus news organization. And that was kind of the moment where I really became involved. That was like where I kind of met and got into some more activist circles, but I still wasn't doing a ton. It was actually then my junior year, the next year at TCU in the spring. I took a class on the civil rights movement, and it involved a civil rights bus tour where we went through Mississippi, Tennessee, Memphis. I don't remember where else exactly, but we went through a lot of the important spots for the civil rights movement in the South. And after that, for the second half of the semester, our project was we split into groups, and each group had to do some kind of project that would work towards social justice on campus. And so my group was responsible for we decided to bring back the campus chapter of the NAACP. And so that was kind of my first like actually like getting involved doing activism work like on campus. And so I did that and just got involved in a ton of different stuff from there. I was part of like an organization that implemented a diversity, equity, and inclusion requirement into the core curriculum. I was part of like a panel that spoke about the civil rights movement and addressed that. Like that kind of put me into that world and into a lot of different stuff. From that class is really where it started from in terms of like my physical involvement. So yeah, that was a very long-winded answer to your question, but that's kind of where it came from.
No, it's totally cool. I mean, I mean, like that's the thing, right? Even I just remember like you did so much stuff at TCU, and I felt like it was one like it once you got in it, you just never stopped. And I believe you even like did some stuff regarding like some athletic programs as well.
Yeah, I actually forgot about that. But yeah, I wrote my honors thesis was about academic challenges facing student athletes because I think a lot of the time, right, our view of student athletes, especially those in revenue generating sports, football and basketball, right,
Hmm.
men's football and basketball, we see them and we see full ride scholarships and we think of them as privileged, which to a certain extent, I guess, is true, right? They are getting free educations and oftentimes there are social benefits on campus, right, where they're viewed as celebrities. But that ignores a lot of the serious difficulties they face in terms of academics and actually like integrating on campus. And that was kind of what I sought to address with my paper. So I did a bunch of interviews, read through a bunch of research, and wrote a paper about it. But yeah, it's interesting because that's one group, and it's a group of primarily people of color, right?
Right.
Primarily black
Hmm.
people that we view as privileged, and we don't think about how their race and how their involvement in the sport is hurting them in an academic sense. We just think of we see that full ride and we're like, oh, they're chilling, like they have it great, but that's really not the case. So yeah, that was a really interesting thing that I did that I think a lot of people don't think about.
Yeah, for sure. So let's kind of just shift gears back. That's basically how this is gonna go. We're just gonna keep just shifting gears. This is gonna be a little bit all over the place. I apologize in advance, but as I told Nick before we even started, I said, "Yo, I didn't prepare for this, and I purposely didn't because there are just so many different ways this conversation could go. It didn't make sense to even attempt to do so." So
Yeah,
I
no,
want. What was that?
I said that's good with me.
Yeah. So I think it's important that we kind of just talk about the protests that are going on right now. I know you've been to a couple already. You actually texted me yesterday when I asked you to come on. You're like, hey, I might be going to one in Chicago. I'll let you know. We'll figure it out from there. But here we are. So, from your experience, I have not been to a protest yet. I think I'm going to one tomorrow if I get off of work early enough, which is going to be really interesting. I'll talk about that once we get done with your answer. But what has been the energy like? I've heard people talk. My cousin said it felt like a movie scene, and another person that I have heard from have said that it felt like there was just this energy, this transforming energy from them. So what's been your experience with the protests?
Yeah, so I think that's true. So for some background, I guess to give it kind of a benchmark to compare it to, the most similar protest I can think of that I went to was in 2016 or 17, so sometime in my sophomore year. But I went to a protest when Trump rolled out. I guess it must have been 2017 because Trump was president. So when he tried to roll out the Muslim ban
Hmm.
and not letting them, fly into the country, not letting people from primarily Muslim countries come into the United States. So I went to the DFW airport to protest that. And that was like the closest thing in terms of an energy standpoint that I think I could compare it to because everybody there was like even though we were protesting something like extremely negative and racist, like the vibe there was very positive. Like everybody was coming together in support of these people, and that was really cool.
Hmm.
But it's definitely been amplified in terms of the marches that I've been to. So I've been to 2 so far. I went to one last weekend, and then I went to. I actually didn't end up going to Chicago, but there was a big one in Milwaukee today that I went to
Yeah.
instead. But yeah, so side note, Giannis showed up after I left, so that was kind
Oh, that's dope.
of, I mean, very cool,
Yeah,
but I'm
but
kind
you
of
missed out.
yeah. But yeah, it's a very different environment, and I think it's important to note for me personally, in being in Milwaukee, like Milwaukee is one of, if not the most segregated cities in the
Hmm.
country. Like extremely segregated. It has a long history of redlining and of being divided like regionally, like street by street by race. It's a big problem. Like I've only been here for about a year now, but
Yeah.
even like the little research and knowledge I have of that, like it's a serious. It's got a long history of it. So yeah, the protests have been incredible. Yeah, like I was shocked by the turnout. Like both of the ones that I've went to have been bigger ones, and I mean thousands of people showing out to support the cause and to advocate against police brutality and for Black lives. And it's been really cool. Yeah, and both of the ones I went to remain peaceful, and maybe we can talk about violence at protests and some of that in a second. But
Yeah.
I didn't have to deal with that at either of the ones that I've been to. They were completely peaceful, but yeah, there's an energy just around the country, like from what I'm seeing, and it's really cool in a way that I've seen a lot of people saying it feels different, and I think I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think it's important that we don't just pat ourselves on the back for that, because I don't want everybody to get complacent and just be
Hmm.
like we did nothing, because like nothing's really done yet. But I do think there's an energy, and if we can build on this and continue this momentum, like there's serious potential for change, which is important.
Yeah, you just touched on something that was going to come up probably in the future of the conversation, but we're just going to bring it up now. That's just how this is going to work. I'm apologizing in advance already just for changing subjects and conversations throughout this. But I've had this conversation with multiple people, and I've said in the past, if it's like whether it's like Kaepernick kneeling or another just major circumstance, like I've spoken out against racial injustice, but it's always kind of been in like a low key way. And now this was the case where really I just like I had to I like you like I said, this felt too obvious to ignore, specifically. And so I've had people, reach out and say, thanks for speaking out, thanks for posting, thanks for doing this. And I get it. But how bad is it that we as a society have come to the point where we're now thanking people for doing the right thing? It's just like it's on one hand it's like, all right, maybe it's like a positive reinforcement to somebody who isn't who doesn't traditionally speak out, so you want to give them the satisfaction of, hey, they're doing the right thing, and you want them to keep doing the right thing. But on the other hand, like it's very weird. And I just wanted to get that point out. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I do. That's actually this is something I've thought about a lot, because it's not just you. Like I have other friends. One of my close friends, I mentioned Chris earlier, who usually, obviously, he cares about these things. Like he's a Black man, he has to deal with this on a regular basis,
Hmm.
but he's not always the most vocal about dealing with it. And he put something out as well, put out like a clear statement and addressed it, and linking to petitions, all that. And you did the same in ways that, yeah, I haven't seen you step out like that before, and that was really cool. So I think there's two sides to it. Like, yeah, I hit you up, and I think
Yeah,
you
you did.
texted me, and I was like,
Right.
yo, dude, like, I saw that, like that's awesome, I appreciate it. And I do think that's important, especially for like, I texted you that, and I was telling him that, and like my friends that I've been involved in activism with in the past, like when they post things like that, like I don't text them individually
Yeah.
usually, about stuff like that, because I know they support it. But you're right, to a certain extent it is like, I see you, like you did this, you're stepping out, you're taking a stand for the movement, like that's important. And so when I see people doing that, especially people who haven't done it in the past, like I do usually say something, because
Right.
you want to support that and make them feel comfortable doing it in the future.
Right.
But I think you're right that it's gone a little far in some cases in terms of patting people on the back for doing what should be done. Like one of the this is I was on my, I got a Twitter burner account, and I was on it
Yeah.
yesterday. I'm gonna think through this, but there's been like I'm getting sick of, this is just one example of this. I'm getting sick of, on Facebook, white people just like commenting on anything Black people post, saying like I support you, like I stand with you, like
Yeah.
all that. Because to me that feels like they're saying it to pat themselves on the back for having black friends. That's what I feel like that is. And I think sometimes that's the case in terms of what we're seeing on social media with people who are just posting like broad general statements or whatever, not actually pushing for change. And so I think it's important that we aren't like rewarding people too much for doing shit like that. Now that's not what you're doing. You know, you put out a clear statement, you're now having these conversations on your show. Like that's different. My friend Chris, like he put out a graphic, he was linking to petitions, he was pushing for action. But I do think there are people who are just, you know, making generic posts and using the movement because it's trendy and they're just trying to build up their popularity and make themselves seem cool or seem woke, and that's not okay.
Yeah,
So,
no, yeah, no, for sure, for sure. And I mean, even here with like what I'm doing, I still don't feel like it's enough. Like, even if it is like a conversation with you when we're talking about this here, even if it's the video I made, I have another script that's done that's going to be talking about the importance of taking a stand, and I still like don't feel like it's good enough. So I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna try and get out to that protest tomorrow. I want to hit one up because I feel like I feel like it is such a life-changing experience to go to one. Obviously, that's not the full reason why I would go. Obviously, showing support for Black Lives Matter and all of that and all of the social injustices there, but I don't know. It's just this feeling of what am I doing? Is what I'm doing enough? How can I continue to push through this past this? Because there comes a point where, and we've seen it over and over again, so it's quote likely to happen again, where these momentums just die, you know, and it's unfortunate because it's how we get put into the same cycle. And hopefully this is the one that breaks it. But it really is just now a question of, all right, what am I doing to stay informed, stay educated, and really trying to make that change?
Yeah, and you're right. And look, I mean, you're right that you're not doing enough, and I'm not doing enough. None of us are doing enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like we all should be. I mean, everybody needs to put their all into confronting racism and confronting white supremacy and confronting police brutality. And as white people, like we're never going to have done enough to support in that regard. Right. So it's just working and doing as much as we can to try and make that difference and being outspoken and, you know, calling out friends and family who say racist things, supporting these movements, and doing so in the right way, educating ourselves. You know, earlier a girl texted me asking for recommendations on books to read regarding Black Lives Matter and all that, which was super flattering for me. But like, so I sent her a long list of those. You know, and it's important that we read those and, you know, be willing to educate ourselves. Yeah, I think there's a number of ways that protesting as well, like you mentioned. I mean, there's a number of different ways we can do things, but everybody needs to be doing as much as they can to confront this and to support Black people. And I think there's a balance too. I think we also need to be careful of, and this might be a slightly separate conversation, but we need to make sure that we don't slide into white savior complex and looking like white savior. Have you heard of that before?
No, but that makes sense. I get where that comes from. Yeah, like that line of thought makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so it's white savior complex, for anyone that's listening that doesn't know, is like this idea that, you know, it's when white people co-opt these movements and take over these movements and portray themselves as like the hero or like the savior of this. Like it's the same. It'd be like if when I was working with the NAACP, if I decided to be president, like I specifically didn't want to get into that because I should not be president of an organization that's for people of color. And so like when white people like get at the front of these protests just to get in the camera shot, or when white people like are using Black Lives Matter as like a way to build their social media following or to show that they're cool, like we need to make sure that while we're supporting as much as physically possible, that we're not co-opting the movement and taking it over from Black people, because this is their movement, it's for their lives, and they need to be the ones that are leading the charge and determining where it goes and what exactly it is that we're trying to accomplish, because it's their lives on the line, right? So we need to support in every way we can, but not in a way that's taking it over, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. I don't have anything to add to that. You covered that perfectly. It is just one of those things where, like you said, we can support the movement, but it's not ours. You know, and that's two very different things. I feel like now this has to be brought up because we are two sports people. Colin Kaepernick kneeling, Drew Brees, whole lot of shit happened over the course of the past few days. And I want to start with this. The NFL, or a group of NFL players, and they aren't even players, they are NFL superstars, came out and made a video. And it included guys like Odell Beckham Jr., Saquon Barkley, Michael Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins, Jamal Adams, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson. That is a superstar list of players. Those are all players who are going to be taken in the first 3 rounds of your fantasy drafts this season. They came out with a video and they demanded a multitude of things for the NFL to support. And obviously, this comes off of the back of the Colin Kaepernick situation that happened at this point 3 years ago, where Colin Kaepernick was blackballed for taking a knee during the national anthem in protest of police brutality. To have those players step up now in this way and have the NFL, Roger Goodell made a video. They got Goodell to bend the knee and repeat everything that they want. I don't know how authentic or genuine that actually is, specifically from the Shield side of things, but man, that's a step, right?
Yeah, so full disclosure, I'm not totally up to date on all this. I haven't been keeping up with like the NFL side of things necessarily as much as I should.
I can fill in the gaps for you if you need to. Don't worry.
All right. Yeah, so I mean, I did see the video and saw the demands. I didn't know what exactly did Goodell do. He just what was in his video?
Goodell based so the player's video basically said 3 different things. 1, support Black Lives Matter. 2, social injustice, and 3, I believe the third was police brutality. Do not quote me on that, but I'm 99% sure that's what it was. So the 3 major things going on right now in this country. And Goodell basically said, I condemn social injustice, I condemn police brutality, I agree all Black Lives Matter. And that, like, I don't know, I just feel like for the Shield, the business that was so protective over the flag, over over the entire situation. They were so like, don't look at us, like trying to turn the attention away the first time. I guess now they're just in like the players cornered them, and that was a pro move by the players, and that's where I'm kind of like, I don't know how authentic the NFL side of things actually are, but it feels at least like a start.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's good that it happened and that he didn't say that he came out saying it and didn't just ignore it. That is obviously good. I'm very much like I'm gonna wait until I see any proof of NFL actually changing things.
Right.
Look, the NFL has a long history of being racist and doing racist things, like blackballing Colin Kaepernick out the league. And as much as look, I'm not convinced. I don't know whether Goodell was authentic or not. My gut says no, but I mean, he might have been. But the fact is, like, in terms of the NFL, he don't really have that much power to be changing things anyway. It's going to have to come from the owners, who I'm guessing are not on board with the shit at all. Could be wrong. And again, I'm not like, out of all the sports that I follow, like NFL is probably my least that I follow. So I'm not the most educated in terms of that, but I'm definitely like, I'll believe it when I see it in terms of the NFL actually taking actionable steps to support these players and to reform the system. But so it's good that a statement was made. I guess I'm just a little pessimistic that it's actually going to mean anything.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that brings up a really good point adjacently, and that is the typical brand statement. It's so,
oh my God.
It's so, and Bomani Jones is the one that really got me to pay attention to this, and it was really about, looking at the word choice. What are the words, what are like the key words that are being in or that are not in each one of these brand statements. And actually, I feel like that's personally where I fuck things up on my end. I don't know if you saw my thread as to why I use some of the word choices that I use or points that I made in my blog post. And it was basically like, I didn't use the words cop or police or singular cop because I have family in the service and I don't believe that all cops are bad. But now I'm looking back at it and it's like, wait, but that's the problem is police brutality. So by not fully addressing the problem, there's not the validity of my point then all of a sudden gets cut in half. And so it was just little word choices, and I used the word choices I used because I wanted to kind of set traps for anybody that tried to counter what I was saying. So it was all intentional, and it was all really well thought out. And Nick, I'll link you that app when we get off here so you can kind of review it if you want. But now that I've heard that, and now I'm looking at each brand statement, it's like, shit. Like, there are keywords, there are key phrases that you have to use if you're actually with the shits.
Yeah, there's two that I've noticed, and I don't know exactly what Bomani said, but there's two words that are frequently left out of brand statements, and that is one, police. You're right, and I think it's in that. But it's remarkable how few brands are actually willing to say that police brutality is a problem and address
Correct.
the police, because the police is an institution, like they hold a ton of power in this country, and they're all unionized, and nobody wants to go at them. So that's part of it. The other one is black. Nobody wants to say black or black lives in this. There's a lot of people that say racism. There's a lot of statements that say racial injustice, but nobody wants to actually address the problem and say black, because then you're going to have white people that go all lives matter on it and don't support your brand. So yeah, there's a lot of brands that are unwilling to say black or black lives matter, and that are unwilling to say police. And yeah, I mean, that pisses me off. Like if you make some statement like that, I didn't see it in yours. So had I seen it, I probably would have called you out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you're making a statement addressing racism and police brutality without addressing the police or the race that they're brutalizing, then your statement's kind of bullshit.
Right. Yeah. And after I heard, like I said, I felt the intentions of mine were, still there. But after I heard Bomani like talk about the importance of using specific words, that's when I was like, fuck, I need to find a way to, get in that apology for that, because that's been on my mind for a few days now. So I'm glad that I'm able to say that now and have this platform to do so. God, there's so much. What you tell me? What's another thing on your mind about all this?
Well, because I've been thinking about this a lot. Let's talk about cops for a second, because you mentioned, that you don't think all cops are bad.
I'll tell you what though, respectfully, with each passing video that comes out, woo, that is changing.
Yeah. So do you want to speak to that and kind of speak to your feelings on police and policing before I kind of get into mine?
I don't think I'm fully educated enough to provide a well thought out opinion on the spot. So I'm gonna let you take this over, and if I have room to interject or afterwards, I'll counter. We'll go from there. But like I said, obviously this is trying to use this. Like, go ahead, just go.
Gladly. Yeah. So I've thought about this a lot, especially even today. I've been thinking about this a lot for some reason. And there's like one of the slogans of the movement, right, is ACAB, all cops are bastards, and
that's what that means. I didn't know. I saw ACAB like all over the place, and I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? All right, keep going.
I thought it was bitches at first. I didn't realize. Yeah. But no, it's all cops are bastards. And then we have, you have people saying like police are racist. Like I said that. I said cops are racist. Like police is a racist institution. But I think that's the difference there. And I think that's where people are getting lost and straight up like getting their feelings hurt and thinking it's personal in a way that it's not. Because look, there are a lot of police officers who are individually racist. That's a fact. Like if you look at statistics, like police officers overwhelmingly don't see problems with their conduct, believe that black people are treated the same as everyone else by police officers, don't think that the police system needs to be reformed, like all that. And even just getting down to questions of race, like there's a lot of in polls about this, like there's just a lot of racist police officers. That's a fact. Like that's part of the institution and who it attracts. In some cases, it does attract racist people. But I will acknowledge that there are some police officers who individually, like, were they not police, were they not part of that system, if you saw them on the street, like, and interacted with them, like, as a friend, you're not going to think that they're racist. I think there's literature that I've read, and I agree with, I think everybody's racist, at least to an extent. We have moments where we're racist, moments where we're anti-racist. Like, it goes back and forth for everyone. I think everybody's displayed or had a racist sentiment or thought at some point. But I think there are certainly cops who, as racism is classified generally, like you wouldn't view them as racist. And there are cops who support black people and support black communities. That is true. But the problem is that this is institutionalized, right? It's systemic. And the police force as a whole, as a system, is racist. Policing there's often over-policing in black communities. The police force is in itself, like, brutality is a set trend in it, like the way they're educated, their training, all that. Like, policing is a racist institution. And I saw a quote that I really liked, which was that there's no such thing as a good cop because they either stop being a cop or they stop being good. And I feel like that's
I saw something similar to that.
And that's honestly kind of where I'm at with it. Like, I mean, the Minnesota, the George Floyd murder is an excellent example, right? You've got one blatantly racist cop, but then you've got three who just stood there and didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And sure, maybe there's some cops in the world that would have done something, but look, by in my opinion, by being a police officer at this point, you are supporting and being part of an institution that is racist and has racist policies. So I don't see how, in good conscience, someone could like feel comfortable being a police officer at this point and argue that that institution isn't racist. So I guess when I say cops are racist and when I say cops are a racist institution, like that's where I'm at. That's where my thoughts at behind, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. One of the things that, and not to take away not to take away from your point again, or like move subject too early. I just don't have anything to add to that. I think you said that really well, and nothing for me. Like you're good. Like you nailed that. But still staying on the same topic. I don't know if you saw this. I retweeted it. I don't know if it's Minnesota. I want to say it was Minnesota. One of the district board members of Minnesota, the third ward, I believe it was, proposed the idea of getting rid of police, and it was it was the idea of you need people from these communities policing themselves, and it was and it was almost kind of, I don't want to say this like utopian idea, but it's kind of how it came across. And I think it, to me, just saying that right now and just the way things are going, I still felt like it was a really bold statement to make. Um, I could go back and find it, but who knows how long that would take. But I think it was just a very interesting point. The idea of we're going to get people who are from these communities, because that's another really interesting point as well, is where a lot of cops don't live in the cities where they are policemen at or policewomen at, and that creates a whole other set of problems. So it's really just so basically the point that this person made was it's about finding a group of people who are from these cities, from these places, and who are willing to step up and just police is the wrong word, like control, or I don't know. Do you know where I'm going with this? Can you help me fill in the gaps?
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks.
So yeah, no, but abolishing and defunding the police has been a big topic like in recent days. I think I retweeted something about it the other day. And I think there's a big misconception that a lot of people have when it because right there's it's not an overwhelmingly popular idea right now. It may seem
Hmm.
like it on Twitter because Twitter is more liberal and like people that are loud on Twitter, like it seems often that they're more popular than they really are. It's not an overwhelmingly popular idea with the country, but I think it's growing. And I think one of the reasons that it's not popular is because there's a big misconception about what that looks like, right? When people hear defund the police or abolish the police, they're thinking like there's no law enforcement, and that's not the case at
Right.
all. Like one, it'd be a gradual process, right? Like it's not, it doesn't mean like get rid of all police instantly. They're out of a job, they have to go home and they have to do something else, and then it's just anarchy. Like that's not what's going to happen at all, you know? When people talk about defunding the police and abolishing the police, that means gradually redistributing funds that are currently going to police forces and putting those funds elsewhere, into community programs, into social service programs, into all that, redistributing the funds. Um, and you work through that and you get to a certain point where there's no more funding for the police, right? And as you're doing so, you reestablish some other kind of reimagined law enforcement, right? And that's fine. But if we agree with the last point that I made, right, that we talked about, where police are racist and policing it's a racist institution and a concept, then you have to abolish it, right? You have to get rid of it. And so you have to restart with something new that's not based in racism, based in these traditions. And then I think you're going to find it much more successful. Also, just anecdotal evidence that I've found. I mean, there is data behind it, but nothing that I can pull off the top of my head. But there is so much data showing that when police presence decreases in an area, or when policing like goes away, like when police offices go on strike, crime goes down like every fucking time.
Right.
It's not to say that like you don't need some kind of law enforcement. Like obviously there would still be something if you defund the police, but I think it's a much more realistic and possible option than people think. And I think as studies and kind of as data grows and this becomes a more mainstream idea, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. So while you were talking, I was hearing everything you were saying, but I did find the thread where this idea came from. So this is from Steve Fletcher, Minneapolis Ward 3. And this reads, I don't know yet, though several of us on the council are working on finding out what it would take to disband the MPD and start fresh with the community-oriented, nonviolent public safety and outreach capacity. Our city needs a public safety capacity that does not fear our residents, that doesn't need a gun at community meetings, that considers itself part of our community, that doesn't resort quickly to pepper spray when people are understandably angry, that doesn't murder black men. We can totally reimagine what public safety means, what skills we're recruiting for, what tools we do and don't need. We can invest in we can invest in cultural competency and mental health training, de-escalation, and conflict resolution. And it basically just goes on and sends us. I'll probably link to this in the description down below. But I felt like, I mean, just coming out with that, I mean, like that, and it was just so well thought out. Clearly, I was reading just the steps and actions that it would take for this to happen. And it's just a really interesting point now to see how police reform in particular is now handled going forward.
Yeah, I do. And I think there's two levels in terms of police reform, right? Like you can reform the system or you can build a new system.
Right.
And I think eventually, like police, I think I've made it blatantly clear that I think police are racist. So I think I'm obviously in favor of, building a new system, but that's going to take some time. And I do think there are reforms that can be made in the meantime. Now I support, if they can get that through and make that happen, like I'm 100% for it. But I think there's no need to like, if we think that we're not there yet as a country, like there's no need to still, like there's still plenty of reforms that can happen in terms of reforming the way cops do duty. Like requiring body cams nationwide. It's ridiculous that hasn't been done. Getting rid of no knock warrants. I mean, that's how Breonna Taylor died, because the police didn't have to identify themselves or not. They just busted into her home and shot her, which is fucking absurd. There's a lot of like these individual kind of reforms that police offices can make to limit the damage that racism can do, right? There's still gonna be racist. There's still gonna be racist officers that commit racist acts. But if we limit their power and their ability to harm people of color, predominant, especially black people, then that's at least kind of like stopping the gap a little bit while we work on actually, doing deeper reform and actually fixing policing, if that makes sense.
For sure. And I mean, we've even seen, the movements. This wave has been so strong. They reopened the Breonna Taylor case. The other three officers in the George Floyd murder are now under arrest. I don't know. I forget what the specific charge is, but now all four of them are arrested. So things are happening. They elevated the murdering officer from third degree to second degree, which the distinction between then and second degree is the intent to kill, which that's obviously that's major right there. And so we are everything right now is working and going in the right direction. And to me, it's just a matter of keeping that momentum going. And I have one more thought on that, but if you want to jump in, go ahead. What do you got?
Well, yeah. So I think a lot of people are seeing that, and especially people that are against the movement and are saying, okay, well, you got what you wanted. Why are you still protesting? And I think it's because, look, policing is still a racist institution. There's still instances of police brutality happening. I mean, across the country, we've seen it in response to the protests. I think it's important for people to remember that this fight is nowhere near over. We're just getting started. And yeah, I think for people that are saying that and why are you still protesting? That's just a bullshit stance that is ignoring a plethora of data and showing this is happening. We're not, as in terms of protesting and activism, we're not just trying to get justice for people that are already dead. We're trying to prevent black people from being killed in the future,
Yeah, and that obviously that last point there is the big one, because unfortunately we can't bring back Breonna Taylor or George Floyd or Michael Brown or Trayvon Martin. We can't. It's really fucking sad. But I guess to go back to my point that I was going to make was, I personally have thoughts about the black box and Blackout Tuesday that happened.
Oh God, yeah.
Look at we're on the same page. I can already tell.
Yeah.
To me, the intent was good, but that was maybe the biggest miscalculation of all time. And the reason why I say that is, there's a number of things, right? Number one, I guess sure, it's good in the sense that maybe it got someone to participate in something where they wouldn't have said anything previously. So if you want to applaud them for that, like we said, just trying to get people into the game, that's a start. But to me, it was mind-blowing that someone thought that this was a good idea. Amplifying black voices was the purpose of it, and it makes a lot like that, obviously another great thing to do. But I felt like we were at a point where we just went as a collective, right? We just went on a 12-0 scoring run, and we're the ones that called timeout. we're the ones that let our foot off the gas. We're the ones that stopped our own momentum. You know, everybody on the other side wanted us to stop talking about it. And we were going to sacrifice an entire day, which on social media is a week's worth of time.
Yeah.
And we were just going to just get up and just be like, nope, I'm gonna go stand over here, and I'm just gonna take a seat. And I'm just gonna sit down right here. I couldn't believe it. It was one of the biggest miscalculations I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm with you. And there was, from a practical standpoint, right, the problem was that it was overwhelming the Black Lives Matter hashtag. This is just speaking practically on Twitter and especially Instagram, where there was important resources that activists and protesters worked diligently to get those resources to the top of the page, and all of a sudden they're gone. So that was the problem. From more of a like conceptual standpoint, there are two things that were really fucking problematic with it. The first was it gives a opportunity for people to be really passive and to slack off in terms of like, this is the fucking baseline of what you should be doing to support Black Lives Matter and to support Black people, is posting a fucking black square that tells you nothing on your profile and dropping a hashtag in it. Like, that's nothing. It's the same as, I don't know if you saw, but there was a trend going around like a few days before that of people like tagging 10 people that had to then tag 10 more people with like hashtag Black Lives Matter or whatever.
Right.
Again, people were just using that as an opportunity to get clout and to show that they're, you know, with the shits and down with the movement, and they weren't using it to actually do anything. And so that's super whack to me. So that's one. Both of those did that. Two, and this is the one that really pissed me off, and I just cannot fathom. Like, the biggest thing about a protest is standing up and saying something. So who the fuck designs a way to protest that requires not saying anything? Yeah. Like, how is a lack of information supposed to help in this fight at all? It just, I agree that I think the intent behind it to get people to show support for the Black community, fine. But that was the worst execution I've ever seen in my life. Like,
it was mind blowing. It was mind blowing.
Yeah.
You know, and going back to your point where it's like, sure, like people, you know, like maybe this was the way for them to, I guess, take part in this. You know, it also gives room for a lot of posers who haven't done, as you said, who haven't done shit, and now they think that they're with it just because they posted a black box. Did you do it? Did you?
No.
Yeah,
No.
I didn't. At first, when I first opened Instagram on Tuesday and I was scrolling through it, I was like, "Oh, this looks cool," because it's just a feed of black boxes and like there is some level of unity there. And then I thought about it more, and like an hour later, I deleted that tweet, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm like, this is whack. This doesn't make any sense."
Yeah, for me, it just felt like a trend that was like. It felt like a trend that was very much for white people, and here's the way I saw it, or for non-black people, right? Because it was like it seemed like the intent was to remind everybody that like this fight is happening and like everybody's fighting for it. Black people already know that. Black people are dealing with racism and microaggressions and police brutality. Black people are getting murdered and seeing family members murdered already. Like, they know this is happening. This was a way for white people to be like, oh shit, wait, racism still exists? We should probably do something about it. And look, if that's like what it takes for you to get involved in this fight, then you're not an ally or somebody that's going to really do anything anyway. Yeah, and you're right. It gave way for a bunch of posers to, again, act like they were with the movement. And if that's all you're doing is posting a black box, like that's not going to work. So yeah, I have about a million problems with it. But yeah, the campaign was, even if it was well intended, it was a whack ass way to go about it.
Yeah, like I said, the only word that comes to mind is mind blowing. I couldn't believe it. Like we said, well intentioned, just awful execution all the way around. But now I guess let's kind of just talk about some potential solutions here. Now the obvious one is fuck racism, right? And get that up out the paint. But unfortunately, that's not practical in this current moment of time. I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on this. Maybe you've brainstormed. I know the obvious ones, but you probably have a lot more knowledge on the solution side of things than I do. So go ahead.
I don't know. I actually haven't. The thing is, this is like, I've spent so much of the last week and a half being angry, and that's me as a white dude, right? So I can only imagine for black people, like how I mean, they've been angry for a lot of them since they were children. Like, I was talking to my friends about this, and they're like, yeah, we've just, you know, we're in a constant state of being angry a lot of the time because there's so much to be angry about, you know? So mine's like not even like, mine's a tiny percentage of that, I'm sure. But like, I've just been pissed off for a ton of the last week and a
Yeah.
half.
Same.
And honestly, when I'm that mad, like I'm not usually thinking of solutions. So it's
Yeah.
wild
No,
because
for sure.
it hasn't necessarily been right on my brain. But yeah, I mean, I think the end goal is to defund and to abolish the police. If we're addressing police brutality here specifically, right? I think that's the long-term goal, and it's got to happen. Like we have to build a new form of law enforcement that isn't based in racist beliefs and practices. In the meantime, in terms of more practical steps we can take, continuing to pursue justice for these recent cases of police brutality,
Yeah.
advocating against the officers that murdered George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and against the racist white dudes that murdered Ahmaud Arbery. Addressing those is a very actionable step we can take. Pushing for these more minimal police reforms in terms of no knock warrants, like I said,
Body cam's always on.
for spotty cameras, like all that. Like that's very actionable steps we can take.
Yep.
On a more basic level, like just continuing to raise awareness about all this, and like always being willing to call out racism is, I think, a big thing that a lot of people don't do, especially white people don't do, right? Especially in terms like there's a lot of white people who, especially with their families and with friends, are just like, oh well, that's just how they are, or oh well, they're older, and like that's no excuse. Like none of that is an excuse or a reason to excuse racism, you know. So I think as white people, like we need to be willing to call that out wherever we see it. And if you don't call out racism wherever you see that, like then in my eyes you're not a real ally. So I think those are, I mean, there's a million different things that I could go on and say are actionable steps, but those are a few that I think are like important.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty much on the same page. There's nothing that you said that I have, or that I did. Yeah, there's nothing that you said that I didn't have. It's to me, it's really just about let's just get the basics. Let's just get the basics done. So whether that is just the body cams or just making sure that each officer involved in a case like this undergoes some sort of trial or investigation for it, because obviously justice is a major part of this. And it's really just about trying to put an end to something that has been going on for literally hundreds of years. And how you properly do that, I don't think I think that's the thing. Nobody knows, because this is so systematically ingrained into the system. But
Right.
now it's time. If it's not now, then when?
Yeah, and I mean that's not like this is another, like this gets back to making sure we avoid the white savior complex. Like you and I shouldn't be the ones determining what those solutions are. Like I can voice what I think is successful, but at the end of the day, those recommendations need to come from people of color and from the black people that are dealing with this. And then we as white allies need to support them and to advocate for those things. But we shouldn't be the ones. We got in this mess because white people decided to make decisions for everybody.
That's fair.
That sums up most of the bad things that have happened in history.
Yeah.
We need to avoid that moving forward, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. Nick, is there anything that we didn't cover? Anything that's on your mind that we haven't talked about?
Ooh, there was something and I forgot what it was. Oh, let's talk. Did you actually? I know you did because you responded. You see what happened in my wonderful Texas hometown of Seguin this week?
Oh, we're gonna. Oh, I'm cool with this. Let's go. Yeah, let's rock with it.
All right. So basically, what happened, for those of you who don't know what Seguin is, congratulations. But yeah, when I moved to Texas, I moved to Seguin, Texas, which is like a small town, about 25,000, right between San Antonio and Austin. So like South Central Texas. This week they decided to hold a prayer rally called All Souls Matter, where they prayed about how every life matters and stood there and prayed over a procession of police cars that drove through the town. Not exactly. This is what I said because actually the city manager of Seguin hit up my Twitter this week and was like, he was trying to explain some things and also to ask for my input about things. But I was like, in terms of this movement, like who it was organized by and how it went down, like this is tone deaf at best and overtly racist at worst, right? Like at best, it was incredibly tone deaf and not realizing what's happening in the world right now and what's going on. And at worst, this is like blatant racism and wanting to support a racist institution and to put down black people. Like it was so problematic. And that tweet kind of blew up, which also I don't ever want to have a viral tweet again. That was like not that fun. Like
no, they are fun. In theory, it looks great. High numbers of lots of retweets, lots of likes. You know, it looks great on the surface, but buddy, you go into those mentions and it's a hellstorm.
Well, yeah, I did for a while, and then eventually I couldn't keep up with them anymore. But yeah, I was so fed up. Like I don't know why that got to me so much. Maybe because it's my hometown, or maybe because I saw a lot of people like there was no one before there were only a few people that I saw before I posted anything that actually like had a problem with it, which pissed me the fuck off.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people, like, once I made note of it and kind of popularized it, then it became a big thing. There were actually counter protests in town this past week, which was dope. Like protests for Black Lives Matter.
Nice.
But yeah, there was a little while when I was still going in my messages and just responding to all the racist people that were commenting, and I was pretty heated. So I was firing off some kind of spicy tweets, but that was yeah. I won't say it was fun. It was never, but putting down all and throwing jabs at all the racist people on there, that was probably the best part of my day.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it speaks to a much larger point. And I had people reach out to me, and they were just like, like thoughts and prayers. And we've been over this 100 times just as a society, and a lot of more people are coming around to this idea. Thoughts and prayers don't do fucking shit. Like, what the fuck are we doing? If you want to believe in a higher power, fine, do it. But unless a thought and a prayer is going to stop this, bring back George Floyd, bring back Breonna Taylor, bring back Michael Brown, what are we doing? What are we doing? Please, show me one time when a prayer has brought someone besides Jesus back to life.
Yeah, so I want to be careful. Like, I don't want to I'm not religious. I don't know if you are. I'm not.
No.
Yeah. So I'm not at all. But I don't want to put it down. Like, there are benefits to religion, and religion, when done the right way, I think even though I don't necessarily believe in terms of prayer doing anything, I think religion in and of itself can be a powerful tool for good when used correctly.
Correct. But this is just empty. That's the thing. This is just empty.
Yeah. Now, when it's not used correctly, like in this case, and in a lot of cases over the past where it's been used for horrible things, then it's awful, and it's ridiculous that. I think that because this was a Christian, right? This was a Christian prayer vigil or shit. The police parade was Christian, right? And I have a hard look. I was raised a Christian, even though I'm not now, and I have a hard time seeing how you can justify being a Christian and actually reading the Bible and all those thoughts with this all lives matter bullshit that they were spouting at the rally, and some of the other like awful racist things people use religion to justify. Like, I don't understand that, and it's absurd to me. But yeah, so I'm not religious, but I do think it can have power for good. But this was an instance where it was power for very, very bad.
Yeah, no, for sure, absolutely. It was. I went through some of the mentions. I went through your mentions a little bit, and I'm glad you handled it. I'm glad that you had the what's the right word? Strength, maybe the restraint, maybe, because you could have gone in a lot harder than you did, and you did clap at a multitude of people, but that could have gotten so much worse.
Yeah, I had to restrain myself a couple times from responding to people, but I definitely got my fair share of punches in on a couple.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I'm here for Twitter wars, man. I'm here for it. I was gonna say it's a fun thing to pass the time, but no, this is not really a fun instance. So I'm gonna retract that back real quick. Is that it? Did we cover everything? I think we covered a lot here. I think we've been going for like an hour or so, and like I said, this is a conversation that has so many different layers and so many different facets to it. There was probably no way we were going to accurately and optimally touch on everything, but I tried our best.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think we did a pretty holistic job of covering everything. Again, I want to bookend it because I mentioned it at the front end. At the back end, I want to remind people, like, we're two white dudes.
Damn it, you beat me to it. I was gonna say that. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, disclaimer, right? Like, I'm sure a lot of the points we made were speaking from that point of privilege and from our perspectives as not having to deal with racism or police brutality or systemic oppression. Like, so that's going to frame our points of view, right? And we can only speak to from a certain angle. So I guess just if you finish listening to that, like, or if you go back or whatever, keep that in mind, right? That's where we're speaking from. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed talking with you, and yeah, I think we definitely covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, I think I don't know if I wrote this or whatever, but I know I'm probably going to get things wrong. If that is the case, I apologize. Just let me know what I fucked up in the comments. Obviously, that's just that's a whole other thing about Black people being the ones to educate us about this, and just in the sense of, like, it's
Yeah.
I don't need to get into that. We're trying to wrap this thing up. But
yeah, it's not black people's job to educate white
correct.
people out.
Thank you. So yeah, that's gonna be it for here. I'm not gonna tell you to like or subscribe or any of that bullshit. I don't care about that right now. I only care about you doing your part, whether it's signing a petition, going to a protest, or doing whatever you can to try and create this change. Keep the momentum going. That's all I got. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Later.